Hello, beautiful. And what I'd really like to know is what is good in your life today? This is Kia with another episode of the Female Veterans Podcast. Today, I have with me someone really, really extraordinary, and I cannot wait to introduce you to her. But first, a shout out to my sponsor. So I want to say thank you so much to Grunt Style for sponsoring this episode. Check them out at gruntstyle.com, where you will find amazing apparel, especially if you love guns, straight up. Okay. But if you like fishing, working out, lounging, all of that stuff, they have apparel for you for women, men, and children. So go check it out. If you love it, you'll get 10% off your first order if you use code BAKER. So with that said, let's move on to my really incredible guest. She served 9 years in both the Army Reserve and on active duty, so total. She is a serial entrepreneur. She is a health and wellness advocate and coach, girl after my own heart. And I am so excited to welcome her to the show. Welcome, Sadie.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. So let's go right into it. What made you join the military?
Well, I didn't admit to this until very recently, but this is the God honest truth. I joined the Army to lose weight and to meet a man. And I achieved both fairly quickly. I lost 30 pounds in basic training, and I met my husband the weekend after we graduated. And so obviously there was other reasons and what kept me there and why I was in for as long as I did and successful in the ways that I was. But those were the very true, honest, first and foremost reasons. And yeah, it's kind of funny now. It's part of my story.
I love the honesty. It's super refreshing. I mean, that is actually good logic because, you can meet a husband. I got married in the military.
Yeah.
And I also lost weight. So
Yep.
I can see how that would be logical. What was boot camp like for you?
So let me paint a picture of who I was before the military. I was a theater kid. I was very outgoing. I had just big ambitions. I wanted to be a famous actress. I wanted to do all of these crazy things. And I was not physically active at all, but I was doing really bad in college, my first year of college, right out of high school. And I had a guy that I was chasing that told me about his experience in the Army. And he said, anybody could do that. And so I was like, okay, do you think I could? And he said, yeah. And I'm like, I can't even do one push-up. And he said, that's easy. I can show you how to do push-ups. So I went to the recruiting station and told them I wanted to join. And they told me to finish out my semester so I could get the college credits. So during that time, I started to get a little bit physically active. But boot camp was totally kicked my butt. I mean, I was just not physically in shape. My mind, I was from a small town in Minnesota, and I was very naive. I was meeting all these kids from all around the country, growing up in inner city and growing up in, just so far away from anything that I had been involved with. And so I made a lot of really interesting connections and friends, but it was ups and downs left and right. I was the slowest one, and then I had the biggest transformation at the end. And I think just my personal growth in confidence and really seeing what I could do and what I could accomplish was my favorite part of basic training. And I'm forever grateful for that.
I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but I was sort of different in boot camp. My goal was to be invisible the entire time. So I was very middle of the line on everything. I think that was my role. I don't even think that my company commanders, as they were called when I went through, even knew my name when I graduated, really. They had no idea who I was. I just wanted to slide through and just not make any waves and just coast. And I did that. So it's interesting. I saw people be most improved by the end of it. And so it's interesting that that's what you were.
So there was a couple of super opposite things for me. One, my last name, my maiden name was Stahl, which rhymes with a lot of things. So I was in a cadence all the time. They were always, rhyming my last name as we were marching. And I was short, so I was always in one of the front of the formation.
Mhm.
And because I was slow and just kind of stood out, I have red hair, just stood out in general. That brought me out on day 3. That was the first time any of the drill sergeants like recognized and honed in on me. Was day 3. That's the first time I cried, and I cried a lot the rest of the time. But that was when I was trying to be invisible, but it just broke that seal. And there was actually one point in AIT, because I was OSET, which means that basic and AIT ran together. So I was there for 5 months at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. And there was one point towards the middle of AIT where we were voting each other on the Army values. And I was voted the least personal courage. And I don't know why we voted the most and the least, but the drill sergeant felt it necessary to tell me that I had the lowest count in that category. And that flipped a switch for me. That was a huge, oh my gosh, am I really like that my peers see that for me? So I just changed. And towards the end, the drill sergeants came up to me and they were like, I don't know what you did, but between the physical transformation, the mental growth, and just kind of having to be told how low I was, it just really made me excel. And so definitely it just made me feel like crap, but for a good reason, I guess, a good purpose in the long run. But yeah, I don't think I'll ever forget those moments.
They say that you have to be brutally honest with yourself in order to become the most you can be. You have to recognize what your weaknesses are in order to make them strengths, right? So it sounds like that's what happened to you. It was put in your face by your peers that, you were weak in some way.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to feel like that, especially in that environment where courage and strength is valued. So I could see how that would be really triggering in a way of going, I'm going to change. I had definitely had moments like that in the military a few times in different reasons. I remember when I went into my career in the pharmacy, and my reputation, we'll say, preceded me there, and I was very unwelcome. I arrived to a very frosty response. Okay. They thought I was trouble, let's just say. And I was determined to show them all that they were lucky to have me in that pharmacy. And I did. By the time I left, I spent my last 3 years on active in the pharmacy. By the time I left, I got a letter of appreciation from the command for the work that I did and I didn't go to pharmacy school. I went OJT. And I ended up not going to C school because I'm like, why? I already know everything. I'm just doing what I want to do. So why bother leaving the command and going somewhere else when I love this pharmacy? And it really became like a family. So those things, me being honest with myself about, oh, this is what my reputation is to these people, even though I know it's not true, but now I've got to show them. And it seems like you have that same sort of fire in you where you're like, now I got to show them that that's not who I am. And that's how you achieved it.
And it's so funny now because I have so many people that I've met that, every once in a while I'll ask on social media, what are 3 words that describe me? And there's an enormous amount of people that say I'm courageous and brave. And it just didn't click to me for a long time because I was like, no, I was told that I wasn't, back in the day. And so because of that, it just kind of changed everything. And so, it's hard to be grateful for moments of growth and moments of that bring you to such a low point. We were just talking about this type of thing before we went on recording, where it's like sometimes it's like a trampoline. It springs you into a better place, but you kind of have to go through some dark moments to get to that point. And then you just look back and you're like, wow, I am grateful. I'm thankful, and there'll be more, but you can handle them better. You just become more and more resilient.
Agreed. It is. We need them, actually. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but I keep hearing people say that humans need suffering to
Yeah.
catapult them forward. It's the catalyst for positive change. It doesn't have to be, though, but it seems that that is what typically does it, right? So I definitely have experienced that. And it's amazing that then you became the most improved by the end of that.
Yeah.
And so what else happened for you in AIT? What was the experience like?
So I think this was back in 2006. And so Facebook and MySpace were still fairly new. The boy that I had mentioned that told me that I could, join the military and do just fine. He was always kind of this guy that I would probably eventually date, I liked him and this, and that. And in basic training in AIT, when I did finally get to the library to check, and see, I found out that he had another girlfriend and he was deployed in Afghanistan. And so he had committed to this other girl. And I remember thinking, that bastard, so mad. And so I did have a basic and AIT little romance. But it because it kind of boosted my confidence, because I was always kind of the short, a little bit heavier girl. I had a best friend who was tall, blonde, beautiful. And so I was always kind of the shadow. And so I realized that I kind of had this attention. And looking back, I was always really embarrassed of my behavior, the way that I acted. I didn't do anything I regretted, but it wasn't somebody that, I wanted to represent. But again, it was this coming out as more confident in who I was and what I was becoming and how I was changing and appreciating what my body can do, as far as now I can climb a wall. And in the beginning, there's actually a photo of me in our slideshow deck of 3 people trying to push me over a wall. And in the end of AIT, I was able to climb. So really, it brought out that confidence in, thinking that original guy was all that I could ever settle for, type thing. And it's no, actually, when you're confident and when you bloom, there's just more choices out there. And so I left AIT thinking I was hot stuff. I was wearing this new size of clothes that I'd never been in before. I had to buy a whole new wardrobe, everything. And then I legit was strutting around my small town, look at me now, everybody, what you saying? And then boom, I ran right into my husband, who I'm celebrating 15 years of marriage with in a couple of months. So God, universe, source was just we're locking that girl down. She's going to make some crazy mistakes if we don't. So yeah, that's kind of, the whole, I always said for a long time that basic and AIT were the best and worst moments of my life, but that was before I've gone through more of life. And so, I just kind of look back at it. I have fond memories of laughter. And then I have fun, memories that you kind of cringe. And you're like, did I really say that? Did I really do that? But it's fine. It builds you, makes you who you are.
I agree. I can really identify with a lot of what you said. I lost a bunch of weight. I was strutting around thinking I was really, really hot stuff. But I mean, if you don't think it, who is? Right?
Right.
So, I think we all deserve to have that kind of confidence. And it was really a good boost for me. I started really dating in boot camp. My high school sweetheart sort of took up with a girl, and I ended that relationship in boot camp. So I totally feel a lot of the things that you're saying. So it's taking me back. After AIT, what was your active experience like as staff?
Yeah. So my job that I joined with was a chemical operations specialist. And I went down that route because it seemed really fun and exciting and interesting. And I had always wanted to be a nurse, and I'm a registered nurse now. But I thought, ooh, sciencey, that's in the same realm, right? And so I initially joined because that original boy had said to do the reserves, because in case you don't like it, you can always just go 1 week in a month. So I did a month and a half, and I went active duty. And when I stormed into the MEPS to go active duty, I said, Fort Benning or nothing. And so, because that's where Brad was stationed. And so they fought me a little bit, and I knew that 3rd ID was getting ready to deploy. And I was like, you can't tell me that they don't need more soldiers for this deployment. And so I almost walked out, and they said, no, come back, sit down. We got you a spot. So I went to be in the same brigade as him, which was 3rd ID, 3rd Brigade, 3rd ID. And so went down to Georgia, left home with my Cavalier packed full of all my belongings and moved into the barracks. And we deployed, let's see, a month and a half later. So I was in Iraq 6 months out of basic, and Brad had proposed to me right before we deployed. So we locked that in, and we almost got married. We almost did that shotgun wedding, but of course our parents were like, nope, we don't like that idea. So we decided to respect that. So we got married in R&R. That's a whole lot better. But so we got married on our 1 year anniversary, but our deployment, we were out there for 15 months. We were part of the surge. And I mean, that just was crazy. Brad's best friend was injured and sent home. And he spent the rest of the deployment at Walter Reed. So the deployment was a lot of growth for both of us. And he lost some of his friends, and I lost people that were in my company and battalion. And so like we had a lot of ups and downs, and I just had a lot of like FOMO. I had a lot of wishing I was back home. I kind of resented all my friends having fun partying in college, and I turned 20 and 21 on that deployment. And so didn't get my first drink right away. And yeah, there was just like a lot of craziness on that deployment. But I feel, again, it kind of goes back to gratitude. That's kind of my thing. But you know, part of history, I was part of history. I went through just intense growth, and you know, Brad and I had to really figure out our relationship, and we had our ups and downs. And some of my like best lifelong friends came from that deployment, and we were almost sleeping on top of each other in these tents. And so yeah, that was our first deployment, and came home for 12 months and went back for another 12 back to Iraq. So
Wow. So
yeah.
I have heard some crazy stories coming out of Iraq for sure. But I think the loss of people, you know, I think is the most upsetting. You know, when you go on your first deployment and you lose a lot of people and people are getting injured around you, how did you handle that?
So my husband joined the Army on the buddy program with his best friend Justin, and I think we were 2 months in, 3 months in. Justin was hit by a rocket or mortar or something, and he was technically pronounced dead. Like his heart stopped, and they got him back. I don't know if they pronounced him, but his heart had stopped, and they brought him back, and so he was rushed to Germany. And I will never ever forget walking out of my tent and seeing Brad and his buddy, and they were just standing there, and Brad was like, you know, Justin got injured, and I was like, what happened? And he told me, and I lost it. I was like losing my mind, because he was one of my closest friends too, and just one of the smiliest, brightest people I knew. And so I just couldn't even believe it. And I was like, this is happening. This is real. You know, this is what's going on. And so I almost kind of took the show from Brad. Like he wasn't emotional at all, and I went like super emotional. And we had to learn how to support one another in that way, because my husband grew up in a very emotional household with his mom crying all the time. So he's like, I don't know what to do when they're crying. Like, just stop. You're always crying. And so anytime that I would get emotional like that, it was really hard for us. But that was kind of I don't know if that was the first experience, but very shortly around the same time, Brad lost two buddies in an IED. And then we started having loss in my company, and my sleeping pad was rocketed, and I sat up in my bed like an idiot. Like, that sound is different. That doesn't sound like outgoing. That sounds like it's hitting real close. And then I remember hearing the whistle right over my head, and my friend Julie, Murphy is her last name. Julie walked in, and she's like, Sadie, I need you to get on. And we call each other by first name. She was one of the only people I did. I don't know why, but she came in and she's like, Sadie, I need you to get your vest on. And I was like, I don't have it. It's locked up in a Connex because I'm supposed to be flying out later today. And she's like, okay, you need to come with me, and we're going to go sit outside. We didn't have any shelters. This was a fairly new fob. And so we just sat back next to these sand hescos. And I remember looking across the the tents, and I was like, why are some of the mechanics crying? Like, it's not that scary. Like, how, stupid. I didn't know that Johnson was killed. And so, I mean, just like less than 200 feet from me. And so I had to like make my way to the Connex where my vest was, my, Kevlar and everything. And I sat out there, and then like, we had, I think it was 50 rockets pointed at our base, and they were timed to go off at like dinner that day. And a couple of them prematurely went off because of the sun, and it hit our DFAC and hit the tent that Brad used to sleep in. It hit my sleeping pad. It hit all these areas, and it killed one and injured, I don't know how many, like, and so it injured a couple other people in our unit. And that was like the real just like moment where I'm in danger. I'm like truly in danger. And if I make out this alive, I swear I will, I will do the best I can to live this life, as I'm intended. And so that was just some of the early on moments. Another thing that affected our circle was suicide as well. And so I'm pretty sensitive to that, especially with prevention. And I'm an advocate for that and everything, for just mental health in general, and checking in on our friends, and really trying to take care of it on early stages and not letting it get to the point where it's that bad. So yeah, there was definitely a lot of ups and downs on both of the deployments, and people that will be scarred in our hearts forever.
It's heavy. It's part of the job, but it is so heavy. And I think that a lot of people who have never served can take it for granted. Like, we think of, Memorial Day, you know what I mean? But and it's a 3-day weekend and some hot dogs. But really, the thing about it is, people that we love and care about are gone. They made the ultimate sacrifice. And when you're in those kinds of situations where you're being mortared and stuff, like the stress of it in the moment, and like you said, recognizing, oh my God, like, I am in danger. Like, you were legitimately in impending danger.
Yeah.
And that is so scary. But at the same time, you maintained, like, you had to make it to get to your best, and you had to keep going, and you had to do the job. And a lot of people, like, that's where PTSD comes from,
right.
Having to maintain in an environment where you're on high alert for long periods of time. Right. And it's just incredible, to hear that rockets hit your sleeping pad. Like, it makes it so real. I think for anyone who has served, you understand that. And then especially for people who deployed, because obviously I served during peacetime. So I didn't experience any of that stuff. I did nearly die during service, but it was from a misdiagnosis, not because I was getting shelled. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the suicide thing, though, this issue is huge for active duty and for veterans. And I know we always hear the 22 a day, but I swear it's more than that. And it is a real problem. My roommate was my friend when I was staff. So I knew her in boot camp. She was in a different company though. And so I'd see them marching. We'd see them around. I saw her working in the galley during service week and stuff like that. And so she came to A school. So she was in my class in A school with me for the hospital corps. And we became like, me, her, and this other girl, Reed, became like the three musketeers. We were like always together. And then after A school, we put on our dream sheet. Our first choice was Chicago because we knew everyone. No one wanted to go to the strictest training command, right? So we were like, it's more likely that we'll get to stay together if we pick this base. And then Reed went to Camp Pendleton. We never saw her again, unfortunately. That's how things roll. But me and Susanna, I did call her by her first name, by the way.
Yeah.
Because
so funny.
When you said that, one of the few people I did call by her first name. And so I'm doing a book, a female veterans podcast book right now. It's an anthology. A bunch of female veterans are sharing stories with me. And this is part of one of my stories that is in there. And she went through a whole severe sexual harassment situation. I won't get into it all because it'll spoil the book. But she went through this thing. I tried to help her. And when it was all said and done, she ended up swallowing a bottle of pills. And she didn't die, thank God. Right. But they did put her out of the military. They got her out of there like really quickly. But the saddest part of it, I think, to know that my friend tried to take her life was horrible. To know the circumstances of why was even worse. Right. And this was on active duty, and this was during peacetime. Okay. So it's a different kind of stress, we'll say. It can be.
Yeah.
And it was just so upsetting and alarming. So to me, and there were obviously other people who did on the base, maybe that I didn't personally know, but it just doesn't make it any easier. And it's definitely a problem that needs more attention. And so I think it's amazing that you're such a big advocate. And actually, before I started this podcast, I was on Twitter, right? And I happened to see this post about female veterans. And it said, it was a not-for-profit for female veterans. And it said, the female veteran, they posted an article. It said the female veteran suicide rate was on the rise. Something along those lines was the title. And I clicked into it to read the article. And it said that the suicide rate for female veterans was 250% higher than their civilian counterparts. And I thought, oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's not 50% or even 100%. And I thought something has to be done. And it was one of the things that set me on this path, because I feel like sharing our stories can help us heal. Right. And so it's such a big issue. And I think when we saw how all of those veterans were taking their lives in front of veterans facilities, right? In front of the VA hospital, sending that message, it's like, what else has to happen for people to be made aware of the problem and to help people, like you said, in the early stages before it gets there? I mean, with my roommate, with my friend, that didn't have to happen. If they would have moved her out of the clinic where she was being severely harassed, that may never have happened. So it's a big deal.
There's a lot of, I notice, and I see this a lot with like my friends and people that I know. There's just so many questions that surround after the fact. In my experience in my life, I've had other brushes with suicide that are not military related. One of my friends from nursing school took her life a couple, 6 months or so after we graduated. And I mean, that's stressful too. Like there's PTSD in working in a hospital and in the ER, and it's terrifying because like you have so much control over these people's health and things like that. And my roommate in the first year before I joined the military, when I was in college, she told me a couple years later, she took a bottle of Tylenol, which is not going to kill you, but she thought it would. And so I was like, I was going to wake up to a dead roommate. And so, when you've had this many like kind of experiences and seeing it, over and over again, one of my best friends on the first deployment, and she did deploy on the second deployment, her husband took his life. And, so I was there, like I immediately went to her house. Like I helped them, clean up. Like, I mean, it was extremely traumatizing. And, it just hits different when you hear about it, especially with females, because, we don't walk down the street and people don't recognize us as a veteran. And I'm always sprouting positivity. I'm always talking about good, like gratitude and good things and this and that. And so it's hard to sometimes be like, hey, remember that time in Iraq when, this and that happened? And we talk about these dark times, and people don't know how to relate. And people who are non-veterans have no idea what to say. They just kind of look at you like, oh, I'm sorry that happened. And so then you kind of think, I'm never going to talk about it again because I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable because they can't relate. And so what do? We talk to each other. You have to talk to other female veterans. You have to talk to other veterans. And I make it a point to check on, especially my females, just, every couple of months, once a year, whatever, just how are you really doing? How are things going? And, I kind of test the water and assess the water. And some of them, they're just swirling in this vortex. And it's just like, I'm here for you. I can't change. I can't fix them. I can't do anything. I just let them know that I'm here. I'm an ear. If they want to, talk or go over anything, like I'm available. But, it's ultimately like the only person that can change our thoughts is our own self. So
Mm-hmm.
I try to promote a lot of that as well.
Yeah, it's important. It's important work. And when it touches your life, you're definitely never the same. I have had, some friends as well outside of the military, and it's definitely very, very difficult to have to go through. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of like you said, it scars on your heart,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm so happy that you're advocating for it. And I think it's such an important conversation. And I'm glad we've been able to discuss it a bit. And obviously, if anyone is in a dark place, reach out, talk to somebody, and I will put some information of resources in the description box below, where you read about the episode. So scroll down, and if you need support, you can find ways to receive it there. So tell me, I want to ask you about. You said you guys were there, and then you came home and you deployed again.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it like after that first deployment and coming back home?
Well, we kind of knew coming home from that deployment that we'd be going back. It was really just in the heat of everything with the war going on over there. And so it was like, we already knew 380 was right on the track to go back. And so we just didn't know when. So we kind of came back and we had all this money and so we started to build our life. And we had this apartment and we got 4 pets. I don't know what we were thinking, but we got 2 dogs and 2 cats. And then we were like, what are we going to do with these pets when we deploy again? But we really started to just do things that made us happy. But we were at that time very homesick and we wanted to go home and see all of our family and friends. And there was always just a difference. We would meet with our friends and they, ask those really dumb questions like, did you guys kill anybody over there? Like super insensitive, but it was just like, they didn't know, they didn't understand. And so we had to kind of like balance this like tough guy, like we're so cool, but also, hey, there's some things we just don't need to bring up, that we don't need to talk about. But it was, again, just like a lot of growth and learning in our marriage and stuff too. We, partaked in a lot of the drinking activities. There was just always a party on the weekends, and it just, that goes back to like looking for those warning signs and stuff. Like some of the people that felt like they were just like constantly drunk, and so like we didn't do anything to like stop that or see those kind of warning signs and stuff. But when we started getting back on the track where it's like, okay, now we're going to be leaving in a couple months, it was like this doom, this dread. And there was just moments of like pure depression where I was like, I don't want to go back over there. Like I sat for 15 months on the first deployment, terrified that battle roster number that would come across the screen of somebody that passed away was my husband or one of my friends or somebody I knew. And like, I mean, his squadron only lasts 3 people the whole deployment, which is actually like crazy. Like that was incredible, low numbers. And so the few times that I saw 3-1 come across the board, it was like my whole like body, just went into, terrible mode. I mean, there was some points, like, I don't even know that I've told anybody this, but points on the first deployment where like I didn't eat for days and I was barely sleeping and I was working out in the gym for hours on end. Like it was just so stressful. It was always very short lived, but it was just really unhealthy moments. And, you just kind of like get reckless sometimes where it was just like, I don't care, if I get in trouble, whatever. And so I've always had a little bit of a problem with being told what to do. And so I had a smart mouth and I'd get away with things. And sometimes I didn't get away with things. So the second deployment, I came into it as an NCO. So I was a sergeant. And so I had responsibility then. And there was a lot of moments on that second deployment that there was drama going on in other people's lives, and I kept getting brought into it. And so it was like it was the first sergeant being under investigation. And so it was almost like they took that opportunity to like, let's get the spotlight off of the first sergeant. We're going to focus on, Sergeant Tolberg here. Like, she's not doing her counseling statements right. So we're going to, get on her about it. So then this big thing came from it. And so there was a lot of issues on that deployment. And so I just lost a lot of faith in my leadership on that time. And then around the second half is when I found some new leaders that just changed everything for me. And they were really amazing. And I still talk to them, look up to them to this day, and have a great relationship. But that was another just roller coaster ride. We were much safer, even though we were closer to Baghdad and we got rocketed a lot, but it was safer for some reason. And my husband was 6 hours away on the border of Iran, and he was actually quite safe up there too. But even though he was doing much more dangerous activities, so the second deployment just had a completely different feel, a totally different look about it. It was almost like just two completely different chapters in my life. And so I turned 23 on that deployment. So I always tell people I turned 20, 21, and 23 in Iraq. Super fun.
What's interesting, so super young, deployed and at war, because that's how it is though, but super young and under a lot of stress. But what's interesting to me is the second deployment, even though you were in a dangerous spot, you said you were much safer, which kind of reminds me of when I was serving, because we were safe. We were totally safe. But we're still in danger because anything could happen at any time and then everything changes, right? So that's the military life, right? And as we were I was serving during the mid and late 90s. So we had just come from the Gulf War. So that I came in at the end of that. Then we had that moment of peacetime for a few years. And then tension was mounting. We could feel, and we were being advised of certain things towards the end of the 90s. And I got out before 9/11 happened. It was actually at the end of my inactive reserve time that it popped off. And I actually did not get called back in. But I was really worried I was going to. But the point I want to make is that when you're in a safer position, right? Not to say that shenanigans don't happen when you're in danger, like you're in a dangerous position, but when things tend to feel safer, people get into stuff, right? And things tend to, so like you said, you had someone under investigation. Things tend to happen.
Yes.
And a base, right? A base is a small place. And then people start talking, and then you have a need to deflect from this situation. And you target. And so it's interesting that you said that you didn't use those words. Those are my words. But from my experiences and the things that I witnessed, I saw people get targeted by leadership. And it sort of brought that feeling back when you were sort of telling your story of they were saying I wasn't doing this and it was drama, and, the leadership was not, I had problems with leadership. I felt that because I experienced that too,
So I was kind of downplaying it in that way because it was bad. Like I actually received an Article 15 during that time. And my punishment was extra duty during the 1 week that my husband was visiting over Christmas. And I was totally thrown under the bus by some people for stupid reasons. And then rumors flew, and it was just like completely uncalled for. And if you've ever been in charge of property at any moment in your military, you know how much of a headache it can be. And there was moments where I had no idea where my property was, and it wasn't my fault in any way. Like I was placed out of a position where I could have had control of them, and things disappeared. And then that was just also going along. It was happening alongside everything else. So
Mhm.
there was months, and I have to say this too, like during this time, we had two family members pass away back home in the same month.
Oh,
And it
no.
was our anniversary month. It was like just a really, really hard time. And I get really angry sometimes when I think about this. And then I'm like, I don't want to live in that anger. So I have to like
Mhm.
ignore it. But it's like when you were talking about being targeted, it was like, oh my gosh, I know I made myself an easy target. It was like in this, office full of people where like I was just so innocent. And I mean, I was legit like I would be the type of person that was singing like Spice Girls as we were unpacking our office. You know what I mean? Like just being
Yeah.
goofy and funny. And they were just like, we're in trouble. And if we don't get some of this attention off of us and put onto somebody else, like who could we do this to? And then there was a couple of other strong, independent people in the room, and they were like, not them. Let's go after Sergeant Tolberg. Like, and so and I got nervous. And so that's when, I did like make choices that could have otherwise just been like a slap on the wrist. Like, don't do that. Like, you're like, just stop. Don't do that. But it got exploded because of everything else going on. So,
Mhm.
um, everybody was it was like they were bored and they wanted some drama. And I mean, I legit didn't eat in the cafeteria or the DFAC for, probably a good month. I only went to work out in the middle of the night when nobody else was there. And I just didn't want to look at anybody or be around anybody for a while until it all fizzled out. And luckily, I mean, the second half, like I said, was really good, and I felt very supported. And finally, just like they, like I was seen, because I worked in the orderly room under the first sergeant commander. Like I was given the opportunity to shine. I was known as one of the best, workers, and like I was finally just like put in the right type of leadership that I needed because I was also promoted young, like following all this, but they had no reason not to promote me. So I mean, um, they just followed along with the steps, and my points were low, and yeah, so that's more of the details with that
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, I totally feel that. It's not the first time. I've heard stories similar to this before. I
Hmm.
actually witnessed it happen to people. I
Hmm.
experienced some of it. And it's interesting because you said, when you got good leadership. So all of this stuff happened. And then a shift happened because you found the right mentors and things like that. Was me when I got to the pharmacy.
Hmm.
The shift happened when I got under Commander Hirsch and Petty Officer Scruggs. They were good leaders,
Hmm.
and even though I had to prove myself, I think probably not to Commander Hirsch. I think he just didn't care what the rumors were. And he was just a
Hmm.
good dude. He was fantastic. But to everyone else, I had to prove myself, and I was determined to do it. And I think that was really life changing for me. A lot of things happened too. I got married during that
Yeah.
time period because I could see that the targeting was so serious that I almost ended up in the brig.
Mm.
And at that moment, when I was with NCIS getting interrogated, which I don't talk about a
Ugh.
lot, but at some point I will
Wow.
discuss it. Um,
Yeah.
I realized that, oh my God, this is serious. These people are trying to destroy my entire future, my entire
Hmm.
life. And if I don't make a change, even though I wasn't really even doing anything, it was
Yeah.
just rumors. And, I was associated with someone that the command didn't care for. Right. It was a good
Yeah.
friend of mine. And so it was sort of guilt by association and a
Hmm.
lot of things like that. But I recognized it that if I didn't make this shift and this change, that I might not make it out of the military with an honorable discharge or
Hmm.
free.
Yeah.
so,
Right. Oh my God.
so, so I made the shift, but part of that was the leadership that I was under,
Hmm.
and they were great. Lieutenant Baker was another one. There were some civilians like Dell and Nancy that worked with me in the pharmacy, and Gloria, and like a lot of really cool people that I worked with in the pharmacy. And I just really adored them.
Yeah.
So it made me go, look, I love what I'm doing in the pharmacy. I don't want to jeopardize that. And I'm going to make this shift because these people, I can see that they see who I am. And
Hmm.
I've proven to them that I'm this, amazing person
Hmm.
and not at all what everyone is saying that I am. And
Yeah.
they believe in me, and I'm going to continue to make them proud, kind of is how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Mm-hmm.
super young. I think I was like 24, 25
Yeah.
time. So that's kind of how that went. So I really identify with the value of good leadership. And there has
Mm-hmm.
been many episodes where I've talked to people where the base was toxic. The entire base
Yes.
was toxic.
Yes.
And it's a real thing. It happens. We've seen, questionable leadership at Fort Hood and the investigations going on in there.
Yeah.
So it's real. Like you can, and that's here in the States. I
Yep.
hear a lot more about other bases on other countries. I've heard
Yeah.
some of the horror stories, a lot of questionable activities going on in the Middle East. I've heard on the podcast.
Oh,
You haven't
yeah.
heard those episodes. They're there. But I definitely feel that difference. When the leadership is really good, your experience can be so amazing in the military.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that, I kind of talk to people when they're getting ready to join the military. Like we've had a few people that kind of consult with us and stuff. And I mean, it really is just like if you don't feel like you have good supportive advocating leadership, you just need to like hunker down and get through it because it's temporary. I mean, chances of that leader going to the next duty station with you, or, you guys like leaving at the same time are so slim. And it's like, it's only going to be for a couple of years. Like, I know it's hard in the beginning to think about that because you're like, this is where I'm at now. Like I'm stuck on this army base, or I'm stuck on this deployment, or I'm stuck with this person forever. My husband was at Fort Riley before. We live in LA now. He teaches ROTC out here, but, we were at Fort Riley, and Fort Riley was like really toxic for a long time. And there was a lot of suicides, and there was a lot of just like every other week in the news, something like another dead soldier somewhere. And we were like, what is happening? It was scary for me as the spouse. Like, I was like, what? And we were seeing like top leadership falling. Wow. And that was scary because we're in a really good place where, we've always taken something like, mental health very seriously. Not always, but I guess more often than not. And so we really talk about and talk through everything that we've been through. And my husband but there were moments where he was so frustrated with his chain of command where I'm just like, are you like, I need you to look me in my eyes. Like, are you okay? Like this, I don't like who you are around these people and like what they do to you. And we've always tried to leave work at work and home at home. My husband was a drill sergeant as well. And so I loved watching him as a drill sergeant. I have to say this, when he was in his hat and he was yelling at those soldiers, like I never found him more attractive.
I can
for
see
some reason, I was just like, when he got orders for drill sergeant, I was like, oh baby, like I'm ready. Like let's do this. But had to throw in something light there real quick. But like, I mean, I would watch him and like sometimes get to take pictures and sometimes ride along and see stuff and like just really just see it. Think it was so funny to see him in this role. And then he would come home and pick up our daughter and he would just be like, I'm a teddy bear and I love you. Like, I love you. And like all these sweet things. And I just like, it actually, it was so sweet, but it did cause, kind of like an adjustment, like almost like a light switch. Either you're on or you're off. You're on or you're off. Like, how do you be the middle? How do you just like be normal? And there's been complete years in my life where I didn't mention anything from the deployments. Like when we talk about Johnson, who passed away on the deployment where, he was rocketed, I was a part of the Freedom Flight. And so, like I said, I was supposed to fly out that night. My vest was in this Connex. And so I finally got my vest and we went out to the flight line. We were getting ready to go do this chemical mission in Fallujah. And we were waiting for our bird. And, like we weren't sure if we were going to get hit again. And then all of a sudden, everybody's like, everybody gather over here, stand and form two lines. And we pulled two lines facing each other. And as I'm figuring out what's happening, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's his body. They're going to load him onto the Freedom Flight to send him home. And I looked at these people across from me and it was all of the medical staff and they had blood on their uniforms. And I'm sitting here 20 freaking years old, looking at some of my other, chemical guys that we were going to go to Fallujah and clean up nitric acid. And then I see all these mechanics in my company, my friends, they are, tears soaked down their face. and they pull out, I'd never ever seen anything like this. They pulled out this man in the body bag, and they carried him, carrying him to the bird as the sun was setting. And we saluted him, and like they loaded him up, and like, I mean, it was just the most heart-wrenching, hardest moment of my entire life to be a part of that. Like, just as the bird was flying away, it was just like tears just streaming like sideways down my face. And like, I go years without talking about that, because like it is really hard. It's really emotional. It brings up a lot of this into my, forefront. But it's like that moment defined so much of who I am, and just like taught me so much. And it, like, you can go through times in your life where you don't bring up stuff. You don't talk about it. And when you talk about writing a book, it's like, I've always wanted to write a book. It's on my bucket list, because there's lessons that I experience that other people can learn about and either relate to or learn from. And, I want to honor his life, his legacy. He had a daughter, like everybody was his friend. Like, I mean, like you said, bringing it Memorial Day and stuff, like that's who we remember. Not, did you buy enough, matches to light up the grill, or whatever. It's like, it's just, it's so crazy how, you could turn off those switch. And like, I've worked in the ER as a nurse, and like that, like reminded me of a lot of that, because you're in the room, you're doing CPR, you're doing all this stuff. And I'm like, I know how to live in this space. I know how to be in this environment, because I've lived in that kind of mode. But I thought maybe I could do good and better and all this stuff. But the piece that was missing for me as a nurse, and I still am a nurse, but the piece that was missing there is that there was no follow through. I never saw these people again. So I don't know if they lived happily ever after or not. Like, I just had to make up the story that like, John Doe like did CPR, we got him back, sent him up to ICU, and then he had, 7 more kids and built this beautiful life for himself, just like a movie. But, I'd never had any of that. So that was kind of that missing piece for me. But, which kind of goes along with what I do now, which is more preventative and more advocating and in front of an ER visit type thing. So I don't remember what the original question was. That just kind of put it down that road.
It's all good. But you know what? It's something really that I love that you said is that, you shut it off like a switch. And I think that as veterans, especially as female veterans, we do that a lot. Like in wartime scenarios, and all of, our veteran sisters who have deployed and have seen these things can identify with what you're saying, and all of us who have served can certainly understand it, because the potential for that is there always. Right. And whether it's, a veteran brother or sister who passed away after serving or during a deployment, we sort of shut down. Or a lot of the stories or of experience that we had when we served in general, just there's a culture of silence surrounding our stories, and the general public has no idea really. We talk about it with each other because it's easier, because we understand more. Right. We get it. When I get your pain, I feel your pain. I don't want to cry when you're tearing up talking about it, because I can feel it. Like I feel it. And we often shut that off. So it is really important, I think, to be able to have these opportunities to share and to talk about it, because when we just shut that switch on that, it's still there. And the more we get air on that wound, the more it sort of heals, as you well know, as a nurse. So, and we share these stories here because, sometimes our sisters aren't ready to share theirs yet. But hearing it helps them feel a little better. So I definitely want to encourage you to write your book. And because I'm sure you have a lot of really amazing lessons to share, and you learned them really, and we learn these typically pretty young, starting out in the military too. So it can help a lot of people. So I hope you do write your book and share that. And I want to ask you about the rest of your military career on active. Did you come back to the States, or did you deploy again? What happened?
So after our second deployment, we came back and we decided, we were going to take a big trip. So me and my husband went to Fiji and decided to have like one big giant fun fest. And that was amazing. We deserved it. We worked really hard for that, and it was really enjoyable. And then we decided we wanted to start our family. And so we took us a couple months and got pregnant. And you know what my leadership told me? They said, well, that's a horrible time to get pregnant. And I said, what are you talking about? I just did 2 deployments back to back. I'm, 24, I think at the time. And I'm like, I think I deserve this. I earned this, whatever. And they were like, no, we're getting ready to deploy to Kuwait. And I'm like, well, y'all can have fun because I've done 27 months deployed at this point. And I was just so surprised. And so I was pregnant with Miranda, and I went to all of the pregnancy workouts. So during the entire pregnancy with Miranda, I did everything right. I was, a leader and getting all of my other pregnant women, because there was a lot of us because we just got back from deployment. And we did all this, and I still gained 60 pounds on that pregnancy. And so I had her. She immediately went into daycare. We immediately went into that. I'm the mom. I have to go to every single appointment. My husband couldn't get out of work to go to these appointments, and his company or his troop office was literally next door to mine, but we were in different battalions. And so he was one of the only dual military males in that company, and his was an all male company. And so they just didn't quite understand, like, you need to go again to your daughter's appointment. And so I was the one always having to go. And of course, my unit was like, I guess we don't have a choice but to let you go get your daughter's 2-month shots, things like that. So
real nice.
So yeah, it was lovely. So for the first 6 months after she was born, I again went to every single postpartum PT. I was actually running really fast. I was doing really well. And there was 2 things that went horribly wrong. The first one was I kept in secret that I was having a hard time with my bladder. And I just kept pushing through it because I was way too embarrassed to tell anybody, until all of a sudden it was like, I can't run without just completely soaking my shorts. They gave me a male to talk to about my medical issues. And so I'm sitting here telling this, male, I think he was a PA or something like that. And he was like, I don't know what to do with you. So he sent me to urology. Urology was like, sorry, we can put you on this bedwetting medication and for teenagers. And I was like, okay, it did nothing except for just make my skin and my lips and my mouth dry. It was an anticholinergic. And anyway, like, I legit was like told, you could have surgery, but if you plan to have more kids, like, we're not going to do that for you. And so, like, of course I couldn't tell any of my chain of command. Like, I just literally had to like go through all that. So that went horribly wrong. And then towards the end, they're constantly taping you. They're constantly weighing you. I only lost 50 of the 60 pounds. And they get ready I was promotable to E6, and I was getting ready to go to the course that I needed to become an E6 over the summer. So I was going to have to leave my baby at like 7 months old. And so I was getting ready for that. And I had all these things lined up and planned for the next steps in my career. And exactly to the day, on 6 months when my daughter was born, they taped me and I busted. And they flagged me, and they took away my promotable status, and they took away all of my leaves and my awards and everything that I had coming up. They took away the school, and I was basically treated like I was a POS. Like I lost everything. And so at the time, most of my unit was deployed. So I was on Rear D, and I was literally one of the pillars of Rear D. I was in charge of a lot of things. I was on it with all of these things. And I felt such utter betrayal and such utter disgust, and like so upset because they taped me a week later and I passed. And yet I was flagged for the first time. And it was so horrendous to go through that. That's when I said, you know what? I'm done. And so this was in like May, and I left the Army the following January early so I could go to college again for nursing. And so I put in a request to get out a little bit early, so I could start the semester. And by the way, I also had to pay back a ton of money because my bonus that I received for my reenlistment, nobody told me that they were going to take this money away from me, that I signed on for my contract. And technically I ended my contract a couple months early. So I had to pay this money back. And so that was the end of the experience when I left this brigade that I gave my freaking heart and soul to. I got a high five and a handshake, and we'll mail your award to you later. That was it, because most of my
Wow.
unit was gone. The people behind, I truly felt that a lot of them were seeing me as a quitter and seeing me as somebody who was just giving up. And so again, that whole like, I got to prove people differently. Like I am extraordinarily successful, in my opinion, upon leaving the military. But I spent the entire time in nursing school terrified that I would fail. So I went into the reserves, and I was so afraid that, what if nursing school is a bad choice? I wanted to have something to lean back on, something I could go back into if I needed to. But unfortunately, after I left the military, I really struggled with my weight, and I continued to gain weight, gain weight, gain weight. And that's a different story that also goes into, why I do what I do now. But yeah, I was just in like a horrible, horrible place. And the reserves was not fun. Had poor leadership there. And that was just a completely different experience too. I spent an entire drill weekend rearranging a bulletin board because my NCO didn't like it each time. And she'd come out and micromanage it, and I'd fix it, and then she'd come back out, and I don't like that, fix it. I spent an entire drill weekend doing that as an E5 with all the experience and everything I'd done in the Army. I was like, this is what I'm doing. And so after a particularly hard weekend, I went into class on Monday and I failed a test. Well, I didn't fail it, but I didn't get an adequate grade. And so that's when I called it the reserve unit and said, I'm done. And that was it. I didn't even get a handshake or a high five on that. It was just done. And that was chapter closed. That was it. It was just done. I was no longer a soldier. And I waited out my IRR time, and that was the end of that. So now I'm a military spouse, and so I have to play that navigation, the navigation of being a military spouse who's also a veteran, living on a military base, and just navigating the ins and outs of, we've been in now for 15 years, and so sometimes it is like that strange place where it's like, don't take credit for your husband's career, but it's like, we made that conscious decision that he was going to take the military as his full career, and I was going to go to college to get a skill like nursing, and navigate all this stuff. And now I'm an entrepreneur, trying to like do all of this stuff as a military spouse, where people don't always understand that a lot of them don't work, and a lot of them have their other choices and their different lifestyles and stuff. So it's definitely been a very wild ride, but I do often think back, and I spent many years very angry about the way that my military career had ended, and how I hear these beautiful stories of other people that just, like they just have these ceremonies and all these wonderful things, and like, oh, these big going away parties and stuff. And yeah,
I feel
that's kind of
you.
that.
I feel you. That's so disheartening. I feel so sad that you experienced that with so much time in, and everything that you experienced while you served. It does feel like anticlimactic, right?
Yeah.
Like it feels like at least, a going away party was in order at some point, at least from active. Maybe I don't know too much about the reserves. I've heard both good and bad stories from my guests on the podcast.
Yeah.
But it does seem like at least goodbye.
Right.
You know what I
And
mean?
I
It
mean,
just feels so
there was a
empty.
couple of friends that, a couple of my friends that, had made a something out of it, and I mean, there was just a lot of different things going on. When the unit did redeploy, I went to, they're coming home, like when they got off the airplane, and like they have the big ceremony and stuff. So I went when my friend AJ was getting off the bird, and the first sergeant and the commander and a bunch of other people were getting off of that flight as well. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm like so excited and so receptive. And I was like, I met AJ's family, and they came up from Florida, and like I was so friends with her, and like all this stuff, and I was so excited to see her. And then I was like, hey, first sergeant, and like, saying all these other people, and they're like, what's up, quitter? And I mean, like, they were trying to be like funny and joking and this and that, and I was just like, yeah. Well, I'm getting an A in psychology. Thanks for asking, like trying to like shoot the shit back with them, and be funny or whatever. But I was like, just in so much of a headspace about it, where I was like, you don't even know, like, this was a terrifying decision, and just it brought so much. And like, I thought maybe some of those people that I spent every day with would invite me when they'd go out to do things or keep me involved or this and that. But I got really busy in school, and kind of busy and other stuff. And so like, I mean, just never saw these people
Wow.
again. And at that point, like I was one of 6 people in my company that had been there. Like there was only 5 people that had been in the company longer than me. So like I had tenure there. I was,
Hmm.
had been there a long time in that active duty unit. And so like I was very well known within the battalion, for good and bad reasons. But, it was like just so difficult to kind of navigate and stuff. But through all of that, I mean, now I can honestly say, just, without a shadow of a doubt, that I have so many good friends now as a veteran with people that I serve, even if we barely spoke while on active duty. Like some of them will come up to me and say, when I was pregnant, you advocated for me. And like other ones came up to me, like, I remember when I got to this unit and you warned me about these men, and then other women that were
Hmm.
like, you were there for me when I had a debilitating migraine and everybody was calling me weak. You were the only one that like sat there with me and like gave me water and did all this stuff. And like I hear these stories and it just like my time did matter. What I did matter. And it mattered to these people individually. And I get nothing more out of life than helping other people and just being that servant leader. And while sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh, I wasn't a very good NCO, or I wasn't a very good, friend sometimes. Like I gave in to gossip and did all these other things. But I was like, these stories and these things that people remember me by and like what I did, it just was natural. It's not like I did it for any other reason. I didn't get an AAM or an RCOM or anything for that type of stuff. Like that's entirely from the heart. And that is what I keep so much more closely. And that's what I remember. And that's what I do now by checking in with these people and just, how are your kids? How are you doing? Like, how's your marriage? Like, how's the job? Like, and just be so proud of these people and these friends when they get these little wins. And I don't care what it is. Like, oh, I won the Daisy Award at work. I don't know what a Daisy Award is, but I'm so happy for you. I am so happy for you, and
Yeah.
and so just that type of thing, because we just need it. And, that's why when I saw this podcast, I was like, I think this is incredible. And this is exactly the type of stuff that I want to be a part of. And I mean, just even to the listeners, like, even if like, you don't know me, like you can follow me or not if you want to on Instagram or anywhere else or whatever, but I am here. I am an ear. I am somebody who will cheer you on, will uplift you. You don't have to care about any of the things that I do as a business owner. I'm here. I'm an advocate. I'm a friend. I'm a fellow woman, a fellow warrior, and I just care about you. And even if it doesn't feel like anybody else does, I know me and I know Kira does too. Like, I mean, it's totally like, that's what we do here. So
That's what we do here.
yeah.
It's really amazing. We care about people here. We care about
Yeah.
our veteran sisters first and foremost, and our sisters who are still active, who are still
Hmm.
in the grind, in the hustle of serving. We care. And
Yeah.
so I think you said that beautifully. And the way you explained your transition out and how life became as a military spouse is really touching and profound. And what I really love is you talking about the impact that you made on people, that the unusual impact that we make, because that is what it is. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? I'm a migraine sufferer, so I get that. When
Yeah.
people calling you weak, people calling you all sorts of things because of the expectations and the groupthink and
Yep.
the brainwashing, we will call
Hmm.
a spade, of what it is of being in the
Right.
military and the culture and everything like that. It's really important, those little moments that you
Hmm.
had for people, for standing up for people, for supporting someone. And those things do matter, especially in that environment.
Yeah.
Especially in that environment. And I really love your honesty because, not everybody, when you are deeply immersed in that environment and in that culture, we don't always do, like when you said you gave into gossip, like we don't,
Hmm.
sometimes you do. And lots of people
Hmm.
did about me, so I
Hmm.
understand
Hmm.
that, and it's really hard to stand up. It's really hard to go, to step aside of the group and be
Yeah.
and be the odd person out in that culture. So I mean, when you can take those little moments to reach out and to connect with people and to be there for people, they really make a difference. And sometimes it's the difference
Hmm.
between life or death.
Yeah.
So you never
Absolutely.
know. You just really never know what you could be doing in any given moment that could change the trajectory of another person's entire life. That
Yeah.
moment, that supporting a pregnant girl who's getting shit. Cause how many times have people heard, for at least us in the Navy, a baby doesn't come in your sea bag. Right. And you're getting shit
Oh, I
for
know. Was that
deciding to
issue
become
to
a
you?
mother.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not standard issue,
Yeah.
or the fact that you're like, well, I'm active. We are both active duty, which is something that one of the difficulties that can arise when you're both active. My spouse and I were both active. We had a fairly easy time, except for everyone, because I gained weight. Right? This is a story that you'll appreciate. Because I gained weight after I got married in the military, I did struggle with a little weight issue there.
Yeah.
And people would always ask me if I was pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
And say, well, when are you guys going to have a baby then? After they've already insulted me.
Yeah.
When are you going to have the baby? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's just all of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But
I feel like I have some PTSD from weight because I still think that I need to be the height and weight that I was when I was 19. And why do I have that?
Really?
And those moments where people ask if you're pregnant, it rings in your brain sometimes. And I had such an unhealthy outlook on my body, especially when I was pregnant with my 3-year-old. I was 90 pounds heavier than I am now. And could you imagine, as this person who had gained all this weight, remembering that 19-year-old expectation, how, it's it just sounds like crazy, but it's that's what the brainwashing, did to us, where we felt like we had to fit into this mold. If you don't run this fast, if you don't do this many, pull-ups and sit-ups and push-ups and all that stuff, then you're not worthy. And you're going to get flagged and you're going to have all these things. And so that is scarred. And that is disgusting pressures. We didn't have enough pressure from celebrities and from magazines and from, TV shows on what we're supposed to look like as women. So I get really passionate. And again, we could probably do a whole other podcast on that alone.
Right.
But I just get so that's why, I'm in nutrition, I'm in health and wellness, all these things. So I care about health and how you feel more than what you look like or what the scale says. But it's because those scars that, are on our hearts from what we were supposed to be like back in those days. And I'm all about, how you feel, and not about what the scale says, and not about what any other society thinks that you should be like. It's about how you should feel on the inside and what your self-worth and your self-value is. And it should be top notch, 100%. I don't care what anybody thinks of me. I care what I think of me. And I think the world of me. And I didn't used to for a long, long time, but I've really worked on that. And I'm just so much more free now. I just feel so much better than I ever have. And I'm not perfect. And I love that I'm not perfect. So I like to advocate for that.
That's amazing. I think it's really important too. I mean, I remember getting written up for then being too skinny, right?
Yeah.
So I put the weight on, then I lost all the weight and then some. And then, in the pharmacy, everybody ran. So it was like a runner's, so I got really into running. So I, because it was the environment, right? You got, know what it was? You got a 2-hour lunch if you worked out. On your workout. Was it an hour and a half or 2 hours? Something like that. And so everybody wanted that extra time, right? So I would run, I would work out. I worked out every day. And I got so skinny that I remember I got pulled aside and I got written up and counseled on eating disorders.
Oh my goodness. You're like, I can't please you people.
I cannot wait. But that was one of the funny moments. But body image is so wrapped up in serving. And actually, I think this might be one of the first times we really talked about it on the podcast, but it's true. And I bet you there are so many women who had eating disorders. I did. Yeah. I did actually have an eating disorder, not at that time, but I did struggle with eating disorders after leaving the military, that it started in the military from all of that, from being bigger, then getting counseled because I got too thin and all of that stuff. So it did really mess with my mind, and I did struggle with that. And I'm sure there's a lot of other women, a lot of other female veterans who did struggle with weight, whether it was to feel safer, right? So they put weight on in the environment, or because of, I did have one of my guests talk about being taped, and it was actually harassing. Right. And so that's something that we did talk about, but we didn't go deep into the weight. We talked more about the harassment of it. But
Yeah.
this is also an issue, and it's why I love that you can use your nursing skills to advocate for, preventative medicine is the best kind, is what we were taught in
Right.
core school. And so, and to help people and to, prevent all of these things. So, as a military spouse and someone who's a serial entrepreneur and you work on all of these businesses, how is it that you do help people with your businesses? And how did you actually decide that that was the path for you after you left the military?
So when my husband was stationed in Kansas, I was pregnant with my son, and I gained 90 pounds, and I watched all of the Netflix, and I built him on biscuits and gravy. And I let a lot of things go, whether it was my self-esteem and it was my body. I had residual joint pain, as we all do from our time in service, whether you were in for 5 minutes or 5 years or 20 years, like we all have issues with our body from our time in the service. And so I just really stopped doing any sort of self-care. And so when I had my son, I went back to the crash dieting and to the heavy, hard exercises like I'd always known. And I realized I couldn't do them anymore. The joint pain was too bad. And I had such bad heartburn that healthy food hurt. And so I was like completely stuck, and I was crying on the floor in the kitchen. And I decided that I needed to make a big change. And so I reached out to a friend and trusted person, and I decided to follow along with her path that she was on with her nutrition. And I gave it a go, and I started feeling like myself again, and feeling like I was lifting this fog. And at the time I was working 2 nursing jobs, and then the pandemic hit, and we got orders to move to California in the middle of the pandemic. And so I quit the jobs naturally because we were getting ready to move, and we got stuck in a hotel for 2 months because of the pandemic. And then we finally got the go ahead to move out here. And then there was Zoom school and all of these things. I decided to take a step back from nursing, and I decided to pour myself into nutrition. And at that time I was actively losing weight and feeling amazing and starting to exercise again. I was working on my joint pain, working on all of these other issues, and that self-confidence, that self-worth, and that self-respect started to shine. And through all of this, that really started as a very selfish thing. And so I decided to start sharing it with others and reaching out and finding people who had their arms up, like, I need help, pull me out. I'm need help. And so, I kind of became this nutrition coach in different ways. And whether it was, here's some solutions that you can choose from if you want from this company, or, I can talk with you and coach you and really go into some of those healthy habits and those deep dives. Like, why do you choose the choices that you do? Why do you feel the way that you do? Is it from your time in the service? Is it from something from your childhood? And kind of dig in some of those psychology moments where, for me, I grew up in a split household, and one thing that was always constant between the 2 homes was food. And so I had chips always, and I always had, desserts and ice cream, and there was always McDonald's and all of these things. And so that was my comfort. That was my safety. That was my, the safe space between the 2 homes, which were very, very different. And so I had to explore all that and really look at my relationship with food and my relationship with my body. And so all of that has evolved into, not only representing a company that has nutritional products, but also becoming a coach on my own. And then I've also stepped back into nursing, doing concierge IV therapy, which is also very preventative, very, healthy, gets the vitamins into your body in a more efficient manner. And so with all of these different, spinning jobs, I still have 2 kids and my husband who's gone periodically and is doing all of these things. And we live far away from home. And, there's so many things that come into play here, but I live for the success stories. I live for a friend messaging me and saying, Sadie, I got a deep night's sleep for the first time. Or Sadie, I fit into clothes that felt good, or I was able to run a full mile, or, I just felt really resilient, or I let go of something that wasn't serving me. Like, that is what I do. And I just call myself an advocate in all of these ways. And it's hard for me not to not just do all of this for free all of the time, but it is it's one of those things that, I've worked really hard to be where I am, and I enjoy it and I love it. And veterans hold such a special place in my heart. And we are so underserved from the VA. I don't even want to talk about the VA right now because that's, again, a whole nother podcast here. But I'm just saying, they were
For
not
sure.
given the resources that we need, especially for preventative health and for, putting out those fires. And even if you are like full on in the medications in that realm, like going down that road, like I can help with a lot of those, the side effects and a lot of the mental aspect and a lot of the little pieces that come with it. And so that is what I live for, is just really truly helping people on their level, not on mine, because this is their show and not mine.
That's beautiful. I think that with your energy and your passion for helping people, you must help so many people. And I think we're very lucky to have you in our community to reach out to if we need that support.
Mhm.
So tell me, how can we connect with you and follow you on your journey and reach out to you if we want to book a consultation with you?
Yeah. So I am on Instagram. That's kind of probably my primary social media hub right now. And I have, Linktree on there and everything. And my name is at Sadie _getting _healthy. But if you search Sadie Tolberg, you'll be able to find me. And I really try to do a lot of inspirational stuff on there. Sometimes I do like funny marriage videos with my husband. We have one reel that I think is at 5 million views now. That's kind of a sexy, steamy video that's
Oh,
funny. And so I do stuff like that. And then I empower women and I share, the things that I represent. And I just really try to be a pillar of, hope in the community. And so Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and, just reach out through any messaging source. Like I'm an open book. On TikTok, I'm on LinkedIn, like all of the things that are pretty well known, but I can't always throw my direct information in the comment section and things like that as well. But I really try to get back to people, because you never know, what they're going through. And it just goes back to like, how can I help you? What can I do to serve you? And just letting them know that they're not alone.
beautiful. That's amazing. So I
Yeah.
have one more question for you, and that is, what advice would you give to our veteran sisters that are coming up behind you?
I think just in general, in life, in everywhere, there's only one person that you can really have true control over, and that's yourself. You control your mind, you control your thoughts, you control your actions. There are some things that are seemingly out of control, like traffic and the price of gas and things like that. But there's things that you can do to react in a much more pleasant way. And once you kind of master that aspect, you can get through some of these, tough moments that may come into your life. And whether it's a frustration with the VA, or whether it's, inconsistency with being in the civilian world and not trying to understand how these other people don't get life the way that you do. It really just goes back to taking some time for you and self-care. And I don't care if it's a bubble bath, or I don't care if it's a walk in the mountains, in the beach, on the forest, whatever. Just take some time to be alone with you, because the only person that you will be with for your entire life is you. And if you don't like who you are, you can change it. You can 100% change to like yourself, and you should love yourself. And that was a huge epiphany for me. In the Army, I don't feel like they ever told me that I could love myself, like, ever. I was always just put in my place. And, I think it's such an important thing for women. I think it's such an important piece for veterans. I think it's just the main point that I want to drive home from all of this is just, you get to decide, you get to choose.
That's beautiful advice. Love yourself first.
Yes.
Something that I am always sharing on my other live stream show, Hot Topics Live. If you haven't seen it, it's on Facebook. We have a Hot Topics Live Facebook page. It's also on YouTube, Hot Topics Live, #podcast. But we're always talking about positive messages like this. And that one, I think, is number one.
Yeah.
You cannot pour from an empty cup. So you have
Amen.
to fill up your cup. You have to fill it with love. And then that love will spill out into your environment around you and make it a better place. But number one, it is not selfish. It's okay to self-love. It's what you have to do. And I think I struggled with that a lot in my life too. And in that moment where I really made that realization, for example, when we talked about eating disorders earlier, working out for me in the past was always about self-loathing. Right.
Yes.
And I actually went through a very difficult period of adjustment of being able to work out because of self-love. Like, it was really hard for me to work out without that motivation of hatred for myself on some level, right? So that shift had to take place, but it's been the most beautiful thing in life because I have learned, and just to piggyback on your advice here, is that everything begins and ends with the way you see and believe of yourself. So your self-concept, the way you picture yourself in the world, the way you will be the way you show up in the world, and what is reflected back to you by everyone around you. So that self-love is absolutely key. And I absolutely love that you gave that advice.
Yes.
Thank you for it. Thank you.
We were our paths were meant to cross because we just have so much on the same like frequency, on the same vibration. And it feels so refreshing and so good. So I'm just so grateful for you. So grateful for this opportunity to share my story. And I just encourage everybody else to share your story too, even if it's just to one of us, like in the beginning, but like people need to hear it and people need to know, and that's how you heal. It just kind of comes full circle, what we talked about earlier. So thank you so much.
1,000%. It has been a pleasure. You are absolutely right. We vibe. We absolutely do. And I really love everything you're doing. I wish you so much success. I hope everybody reaches out to you if they're struggling with mental health or weight, or just they want a IV with lots of, I might want an IV with lots of vitamins in it sometime when I'm in California. So I'm so glad we made this connection. And I thank you so much for sharing your story and your time with me today. It has been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. I've loved it.
And if you are looking for connecting with Sadie, I will put all of her information in the description box of this episode, along with all the resources for suicide prevention, of course, and with the other resources that I always include of not-for-profits that I'm affiliated with or absolutely love. And so you'll find that there. And if you're not sure where to look, the description box is where I put the info about what this show is about. So it's the description of the show or the show notes. Just scroll down and it'll all be there. Don't forget, you can follow me on Instagram at the Female Veterans Podcast, which is where Sadie and I connected. So you might want to follow me there. I'm also on Twitter at FemVet Podcast, and your reviews and rating on Apple Podcasts of these episodes really help promote the show and spread the word and get it out to more people. So please continue to do that. And thank you so much to everyone who has been doing so. You can listen to this show pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. So spread the word, share it with your veteran sisters and your civilian sisters too, because they should know.
Yes.
Okay. And anyone who's considering, you got a niece, you have, a granddaughter, you got someone who's thinking about going into the military, maybe they should listen to these episodes and then make a really educated, informed decision from the stories of women who went before them. I think that's a good idea. So, with that, we're going to wrap it up. I want to say thank you for coming on this journey with me. Don't forget to check out gruntstyle.com and check out their apparel. And I want to thank them for their sponsorship of this episode. And I appreciate you guys so much for listening and sticking with me on this journey. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you next time.